What's up? Do you feel like your life's going just too good? Like, you've had no problems recently, things are fine, you're feeling well, and you could really use just a crisis of meaning. What's called an existential crisis. Today, you're in luck. We're going to talk about how to have an existential crisis. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm dating my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Oh, Danny, that's a little
So,
a little tongue in cheek there. I was like,
yeah,
I wasn't expecting that intro, and I'm like, yeah, right, all the time. My life's going way too great.
so
Definitely need
great.
another existential crisis.
Have you had an existential crisis recently?
Oh yeah, I do. It's crazy time that we live in because like all the
Yeah.
things that had given humans meaning for so long are all gone. And now what are we supposed to do?
It's funny. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day because, like, you know, I remember in what was it business ethics? I think when I was teaching that, they talk about meaningful work. There's a concept of this, and like the basic idea is very simple. Like if people make enough money to live on their job, that gives you self-worth and dignity. You can pay your bills, you can take care of things, and there's a certain sense of meaning you get out of that. And it's like I think it's gotten to the point now where it's so hard for people to live. And like we don't do the things like in the past, like, if you need a table, you might build a table, you might build your house. You grow your own food, you go hunt animals to eat. Like everything you're doing has a purpose that's very directly tied to your survival. And like, so it feels good. It feels like you're like, yeah, I can take care of myself. I'm a self-sufficient human being. But now it's like, I think it's really hard now because so many things we can't do, they're outside of our element. And it's like, so we feel so dependent on this intermediary money to do everything. And it's like we made that the principal thing rather than actually the activities, the actions, the things that actually, provide sustenance and do things for us.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also like the things that for so long gave us meaning, like aside from just the survival, were things like traditions, things like religion, these that gave us meaning for
Community.
so long, community, yeah. These things for so long they gave us meaning, and all of a sudden, since I don't know, the past 50 to 70 years, they've evaporated. And so now it's very, very difficult to have any external sort of meaning.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to another podcast this morning before we got on, and they were talking about
How
you
dare
know,
you listen to other
I
podcasts
know,
other than
right?
our
Other
own?
ones
You're just supposed to
cheating
listen
on
to our
us
old episodes over and
over and
over
over
again.
again, never stopping. But it was interesting because it was like it was two kids that knew each other, whatever. And the one kid lives in South Korea, and the one kid asked him, like the guy in South Korea, he's like, "Are you happy?" And he was like, "Oh yeah." He's like, he's like, "I live close by to all my relatives, so we see them all the time. Have a family, have a job that like I enjoy." And I was like, that's really interesting because like you look at America and like most people don't live close to their family at all. They're very separated by distance, by time, whatever. And it's like the things that I think we forgot, like, grow like a long time ago, people lived kind of in tight communities. They lived around relatives, they lived around family, they lived around, it's like none of that we have anymore. So it is very interesting. See it all the time with people having struggling to find new friends, and like I hear that all the time from people, especially like our age, like how to meet people, how to like actually interact with others. It's like you can see there's like this loss of meaning, I think, generally, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a struggle. And in America, there's the whole like individualist ideal, and there's also worshiping the altar of money. And both of these things are 100% meaningless.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, or maybe they're not meaningless because kind of the pursuit of them can give you meaning, but then the attainment of them really sucks because all of a
Yeah.
sudden, individualist, self-made person, all this stuff, and you're completely alone and can't
Yeah.
relate to anyone. Or money, this is the answer to everything until you have it and you realize you have no friends, you have no
Still
family,
problems.
everybody hates you, you have a whole
Yeah.
bunch of things that are just cost you money and time to take care of. And yeah, it's not great.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Nietzsche identified like the number one problem of Western civilization was he thought of descent into nihilism and an inability to like, he was really worried that we wouldn't find a way out of it.
Mm.
And like, nihilism and existential crises are very closely related, right? Because existential crisis is a crisis of meaning, you fall into nihilism, right? You don't know what anything means. Nothing has value. Your highest goals no longer seem worthwhile or important or, whatever. And we've all felt this way. I mean, if anybody's ever been depressed, that's like a pinnacle time of existential crisis.
Hmm.
Nothing
Yeah.
seems worth it. It doesn't seem like it matters. You'll seem like, why would I even do that? Because there's no point in doing anything, kind of feeling. And it's really hard. But, while this episode is a tongue-in-cheek kind of title of how to have one, I think they can be actually really important and, really beneficial to us too, if we like pay attention to when they happen and lean into it rather than because I think most people, and this is one of the things Nietzsche even recognized too, is like even when you have an existential crisis or like you fall in nihilism, most people's gut reaction is gonna be to run away from it, because it's such a horrible feeling. It's easier to just go back to like, okay, well, what did I used to believe? What was my old things that held things together? But once you realize that that's false or that lacks meaning, it's never going to get the same level of meaning back that it once had. So you're always going to be in this precarious position of like kind of denying the fact that that it's meaningless, but like still trying to kind of buy into it, Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah. The the so I was listening to this book called Ikigai, which was like about the way the Japanese live very long. And
Oh,
in it, it was talking about logotherapy. So Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And I really liked the way that it presented that in the book because it was talking about how like a logotherapy session starts with the question, so why don't you just kill yourself? And it's like I was reading that on an airplane and it just hit me. Like I think I may have just like burst out laughing. It was so like out there that I didn't even realize, I didn't even think about that. And then I started thinking about it. I was like, that's really interesting because it's something that we all have, the choice to do,
yeah.
but clearly for a lot of us, there's a good reason not to.
In the Myth of Sisyphus and other essays, Camus starts the book off with the first essay is the question of suicide. And he says, answering the question of suicide, like whether you should or should not commit suicide, he says amounts to answering the fundamental philosophical question, namely, why does life have value or meaning? And it is funny because it does. It's like, yeah, if you had a therapist ask you that, it would be like laugh out loud, like, how is this helping? But at the same time, if you really ask yourself that, like, well, why don't I? Really, honestly, what is holding me back? Because even if things seem horrible, is there anything there that I can grab onto that's meaningful enough or valuable enough to keep going? Why haven't I done it? Right? Because we all have, like you said, I mean, look, the reality is we all have the capacity. It's not that hard. I mean, we're fairly fragile little fleshy creatures. So, I mean, there's lots of ways. It's funny actually. On a side note, I did hear that they said, I was listening to a thing on euthanasia, but they were saying that like people like always have this image of like putting the hose in like the car exhaust and like
Mm-hmm.
sit in the garage. They said you can't even do that really anymore because the emissions have gotten high enough that like that would really like probably not work. Like your
That's
car has
awesome.
enough. Yeah, I
Yeah,
thought that was
emission
interesting.
control just shut itself off.
Yeah, it's like nope, sorry, you
I
can't
can
do
see
it.
somebody trying to do that with an electric vehicle and being like, "Where's the tailpipe?"
What do I do?
Yeah.
You just get some
Oh,
water.
yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. So I was so inspired by the little excerpt about logotherapy that I read or I listened to this other book by Viktor Frankl called "The Will to Meaning," which kind of talks more about his theory of logotherapy. And
How do you think was that good or better than Man's Search for Meaning?
yeah, so I still don't think he I still don't think with either book he has succinctly explained to me what logotherapy is and how it works. Because he talks about these like three principles. There's like the will to meaning, and there's two other ones, and I don't really. They're all three things that I don't exactly understand the definitions of, and yeah, so it's a bit over my head.
Oh,
I'm
I
looking
think
for
he's
like
talking
the
about like
simple. Yeah.
yeah. Well, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've read them, but the will to meaning I think is simply just that we're meaning makers. We all want to
Mm-hmm.
understand our world, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
easiest way to say it, right? So we create stories. Camus says it really nicely where he says, um, a world explained even with bad reasons is still a familiar world. And I
Mm,
always like that because it's true, right? Like, even when we hide from the reality that we're facing, even when we have an existential crisis and our gut reaction is to turn away, we're using bad reasons to explain the world, reasons we know that are false, but they're familiar. It makes a
mm,
familiar world. It makes one we understand. Because at bottom, that's the most important thing. It's like, you can see that a lot of times, like when people have abusive relationships, but they constantly are justifying why they're still there, right?
mhm.
It's like we need to explain our situation to make it intelligible to us. And I think that's, yeah,
Yeah.
where that comes
Yeah.
in.
One thing that I did get from that book was the concept that, like, you don't actually have to have a quote unquote good life to have a meaningful life. And
Yeah.
you can also like mess up your whole entire life and still get it together and have meaning at the end. So like
Yeah.
those are the things that kind of hit me because like, I'm like, well, what's the answer? How do I live the most meaningful? And it's just like as long as you find something in whatever it is you're doing, whether it be the struggle that you're in right now, overcoming these challenges that you have to come, dealing with people you can't stand, or just like, whatever it may be, as long as you're able to make yourself the hero in your own story, say that this is actually meaningful, then that's it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. It's really interesting because like I think that's an important point. You can separate meaning and the good life, like you can still have a very meaningful life no matter what. And I like that idea because that's important because like look, if we look back on, look at like use Martin Luther King, right? Martin Luther King had very high ideals that he was working towards. It was a struggle though. I mean, I don't think anybody would look at his, the civil rights movement and say that was a good life, but it was a meaningful life. And I think there is that sort of distinction to make where like, I see that all the time when I look back at like philosophers that I really admire, like a lot of them you would say wouldn't have a good they didn't have a good life by a standard that we normally think of good life, but they had a very meaningful life
Mm,
and a life that had a lot of meaning for them. And that seems to be for a lot more important, I think, than even the quality of our lives is how meaningful it is. Because we can deal with a lot of suffering if we think there's a reason for it.
mhm,
It's when we don't think that there's a reason for it, that's where it's really hard to deal with. And I think that's where the existential crisis comes in because it's a crisis of meaning. So you
mhm.
feel like you're suffering and you also don't know why and don't have an explanation for it. And that's where it gets really hard.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought was really interesting from the book was he was saying that like a lot of times when we feel meaningless or hopeless about our life, especially we look to the future. We're like, I'm gonna die. It's going to amount to nothing, and that's just it. And there's nothing I can do to change that. And he would talk with his patients, and he would be like, well, think back to your past. Because you can't, the past is done, but is part of the history of the entire universe, and you can't change it. And like, think back to your past to like maybe times when you've made someone smile, or maybe you made life easier for someone. Can anyone take that from you? Can anyone take that from the universe? And the answer is no. But it's like that, and just like the idea of that kind of gives meaning. And I was doing that in my own life, thinking back to like times with people that, it just warmed my heart that they to improve their day. And I was just like, I feel better. This is good.
Well, I think this is one of the problems though, right? Because like we said, we focus on individualism. So especially in the US, people feel kind of alone. They have a hard time making friends. And like the reality is like if you've ever had like any good friends in your life, for example, right, or loved ones, like that's an easy way to find meaning. Looking back on
Or
those
a pet.
experiences, like you said. Yeah, or a pet that you love, right? Anything.
Yeah, like a
Anything that gives you that
dog that was just
connection.
happy that to see you and that you fed him and like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's great. It's a great feeling. It's funny. I always like the existentialists because a lot of them believe like, this is it. Have this time on this earth and that's it. And I always like that because that can be scary, right? That when you die, there's nothing else. But it also, I think, gives more value to now. Like, even if it's hard, even if it's difficult, you still exist. That's still interesting. It's still unique. It's still this one time. So make it into something that's meaningful for you, right? And I like that idea too, because it also reminds us that like even if, I quote unquote, I don't think you can, but even if I wasted the first 40 years of my life, for instance, like I still have time. As long as you still have future, even if it's a day, you can still find meaning. You can still change things, and that can justify the whole entire past. And I
Mm.
think that's also important because like at least then, yeah, I might have had a difficult past, I might have had a difficult 20 years, but now I've gotten to here. And so maybe that was all necessary to get there because it was for me.
Hmm. Yeah. So I've had existential crises. I know that you've had existential crises,
Yes.
and I'm pretty sure it's part of the human condition. Uh,
Yes.
for me, I can remember that it would just be like it was a prolonged period of time. So it was something days to weeks, maybe even months, I don't know. But, and it was, just feeling uncomfortable, not good, just feeling not good. And then also like a lot of confusion about like, what am I doing with my life? Am I
Yeah.
doing the right thing? It was a very, I would say it's a very low confidence time or low
Yeah.
self confidence time. Yeah. Is
Yeah,
that
no, I
is that
like
kind of
that.
what it was like for you?
Yeah, yeah. And I think you're right though. I think they are kind of a slow burn at first because like it's like usually like I think for me usually it's like that realization of loss of meaning. But it's a slow burn because it's like things start it's like a house of cards that starts falling down real slowly, until you get to like the real crisis, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, like it's often with depression, right? Like you said, like alienation, feeling like kind of disillusioned, maybe like not feeling a part of things, feeling very alone, feeling
Mhm.
very distant. It often comes with like things that you normally did, like traditions, practices, you know, um, beliefs, they all start to lose value. And like, disinterestedness is a really big one, right? Like not feeling like anything is interesting enough to even bother doing. It's very closely associated with like depression too, because it's the same thing. And feeling like, like I know for me, like you said, like that loss of self-confidence, feeling like no matter what I do, it won't matter,
Mhm.
that it won't change the
Mhm.
fact that there's no meaning, right?
Mhm.
And that's the really big struggle. And so trying to find that meaning again is really hard, trying to reassert it. And I think they can be really good times to reassess like what's important in our lives. Because I think for me, like the last really big one I had was when I was really depressed, like probably like 5, 6 years ago, I guess. And like, but it was also a critical point because it was a shift in my life where like I realized things were wrong with what I was doing career wise. That was a big part of my unhappiness and my loss of value. Like I didn't feel like there was anything there anymore that was like meaningful enough for me to stay. Facing the fact that I had to make a big change, dealing with other things in my life, like it can be a really good, if you face them, I think it can be a great way to start doing things in the right way, where now your life will have meaning and be more valuable. And you can look to that past as, yes, being difficult, but just a stepping stone to get to where I am now.
Mhm. Yeah, it's I'm glad you mentioned that because for me it was the same thing. It was a big turning point and it was because I was doing the wrong stuff. Like I can look back now. I can look back
Yeah.
now with
Yeah.
100% clarity. You know, hindsight's 2020. But I was doing the wrong stuff, going the wrong direction. And I
For the
was
wrong
making
reasons, right?
yeah,
That's the other thing. You
and
got,
I was
yeah.
making great time. Like I was doing it really fast. But like I was going in the wrong direction for me. Not the wrong direction for everybody else. And this is the crazy part because for society, it was awesome. For my parents, it was awesome. For like, all this other stuff, it was awesome. But for me, it was completely wrong. And
We,
yeah.
I know, I was gonna say you hit on something really important there too, which is like this is where people struggle a lot too. It's not that you're doing anything necessarily wrong either to have an existential crisis. Like you were saying, from an outside perspective, it looked like you were doing everything right. And I can verify that because I was there.
Mm-hmm.
You could look like you were doing everything right. And that's what people often struggle with is like, it's because it's not aligning with your values. So yes, you're doing everything right for some other person's conception of a good life, but it's not your own. And so it's failing miserably to satisfy those deep existential need we have for meaning in our lives. And so it just wasn't giving your life meaning. And it took realizing that for you to actually change and start doing things that were for you rather than for others. And I think that's a big reason why people have them is, all these external pressures, family expectations, all of that often dictates our choices more than like what really matters to us. And that is like a surefire way to have an existential crisis. And I went through the same thing, on paper, things looked okay, but it's like, in real life, it wasn't working for me.
And it can feel like such a trap because you're like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no way that I can keep all these other people happy and follow my own inner voice. Like it's just not
No,
compatible. And
yeah,
it's almost like at that time the concept is if I disappoint these other people, that's the end of the world. So I
yeah.
have to just not listen to myself or kill myself. And it's just like those are not the only options out there. Yeah.
Never. They never are, you know? And
Yeah.
like, but you're right too. I think it's like, it's that feeling too of like, like that feeling of dread. Like, I also spent all this time preparing to do this, to live this life that everybody told me was going to be good. And it's like you get this like imagination in your head that like you have to do all this time over again to do something new. And so it's therefore impossible when that's not true either, because you have all those skills you developed. You have all the back, you still have a lot of stuff that you gain from it. And I think like, at least for me, like, I don't know about you, but like, now I can look back on those times in my life and I see them still as valuable. Like I learned a lot. There's a lot of things I can leverage now for things that I'm doing. So like it's not like it was worthless, It's just I was on the wrong track and I need to course correct. That's all it really was. But like it felt so overwhelming. And I
Mhm.
think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. You feel trapped is a good way to express it.
Yeah. And so there's like, but okay, so we were going to talk about the value found in having an existential crisis. And I actually think that it is really helpful to endure through it. And I think that's the only way to describe it. Like you literally just have to endure through it because eventually it'll correct itself, changes will happen, but it's painful, it's difficult, it's really hard to be patient, and you just have to endure. But like going through it, I think is probably one of the best life experiences you can have because then when other people are going through it, you can sit there and you can listen to them. Like I had this happen with a friend not too long ago who was going through a very difficult existential crisis and they felt like their back was up against the wall because they either have to disappoint everybody important to them or they have to do what like they have to not listen to themselves and the thought of killing himself was it seemed like the easier option than disappointing
Yeah.
everybody else or changing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the problem too, is it does seem easier because we look at it like all these emotional conversations we're going to have, the disappointment, the guilt, all that weighs on us so much when in reality, like most of those people will probably be happier when we're happy than they were that things look good on paper or look good from their perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we convince ourselves that this guilt's going to be so heavy. And then, and I think you're right. You have to sit with it, unfortunately. Like you have to sometimes like and I think this is the problem. Like most people run away from it and then they stay in that grind. They stay doing that. And then guess what? 10 years later, they're going to have another one and they're going to be even more unhappy. 15 years later, maybe they do commit suicide. You never know, right? And like, I think facing it though gives you that opportunity to really make changes that are going to make your life so much better. I think there is so much value in it if we face it rather than running away from it,
Mm-hmm.
even though it sucks. Like, I mean, it took me literally like a couple years to really get through it fully. And I mean, but it was so worth it because I do feel so much better now than I've ever felt in like, decades. So like, I mean, that says something, but you have to get through it. It's really hard, and I think that's the difficult part too.
Yeah. I
That's a
think
lot
that
of self-overcoming.
yeah, I think the Dr. Seuss quote nails it where he says uh be who you are and feel how you feel because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. And it
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense because like we get stuck in these situations where we think we have to be somebody other than who we truly are inside.
Yeah.
We have to feel somehow other than how we truly feel inside because we care too much about people who don't matter. But like,
You know what's
yeah.
okay. Oh, I
Oh,
was just
but I
gonna
was
say, I
gonna
thought I was
say it
gonna,
was just
yeah, go ahead.
it's great to have. Yeah, I know, right? It's great to have good friends that uh that you can be honest with and they support you for being you. Like that's a huge thing because then you can see that like actually being yourself is important and those who matter don't mind. It's only the
Yeah,
people
they
who
don't.
don't matter who mind.
Yeah, the people who keep pressuring you, they don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're the ones that don't matter at all. The ones that matter are the ones who are going to be there for you and accept the fact that that's who you are and it's no problem. And the people that really do know you probably would have already seen this too. I was going to give an example I thought of that I probably you might have gone through this too. And I think a lot of people might be able to relate. Like I remember like in past relationships, for instance, right? Like I would get to a point where I knew the relationship's not good anymore. It's not working for me. But you don't break up not because of how you feel about it, but because you're afraid of what other people will think, that the world will be different afterwards. That like for years your life has been with this person and now you're not gonna be with this person. So what's it gonna look like? You know, like these things that shouldn't actually factor in start weighing in more than actually your happiness, your quality of life, who you really are. And that's when you're having existential crisis because you
Hmm.
feel totally alienated outside. Did you ever have that happen?
Oh
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. You're more concerned about people's opinions of you than actually
yeah,
your
or
own.
even like,
Yeah.
and you're afraid of the world being different, right? Like because it's like it's like when you make that like all these examples, for example, you break up with somebody and now you're in the world by yourself. You're not with that person anymore. And so even if it wasn't well, it was familiar and it
Hmm.
scares us. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're so weird.
It's like sitting in a shitty diaper. You're like, I'm
Yeah.
sitting in shit, but at least it's mine.
Yeah, right. At least it's my shit. I can deal
Yeah.
with it. It is
Yeah.
funny, dude. We do so much that's contrary to our own well-being. And even like you said, like who we really are. And it's so sad, but we do it all the time because we're so worried about it's like we're constantly fighting that urge to be part of something while
Hmm.
also wanting to be ourselves. And I think
Hmm.
that's like, a fundamental problem with it.
It's a really tricky time that we live in. And
Yeah.
we're so like there are so many things vying for our attention. So we can't actually like reset ourselves. And then we're constantly marketed to, like
Yeah.
constantly. All this stuff that's not good for us, but will make somebody money is just shoved down our throat nonstop. And it's difficult. Like I just I ha it's good to have these references in life because I've been fortunate enough to meet some people who are like the stereotypical successes who've done very
Yeah.
well financially or have gotten some celebrity or whatever it is. And inevitably, they're miserable, like on the verge of suicide. And it's mind blowing because like you think from everything you see on social media all over, it's like this is how you have success in life. This is how you're happy all the time. This is how you win the game of life. And
Yeah.
it's so far from the actual truth, but nobody will admit to it.
Well, it's funny. It's like because that's the belief we all have internalized, right? That if I just work really hard, if I make a lot of money, everything will be solved. I'll be the best. I'll have power. I'll have prestige. I'll have fame. But you still have yourself. And like, and that's the truth. And like, that's not going to solve, but that's why we all keep looking to those examples too, because we all think that's what solves all the problems. And it's a lie. It doesn't. It doesn't solve anything. And it's like, yeah, it can be good to have more money for sure. Totally. It can be super helpful, but you still have yourself and you still have to live your own life. And I think this is a difficult thing. And like, the other thing we fear with it, I was just gonna say real quick, like with existential crises, I think is that it is that feeling of being alone. Like when you start making those choices for yourself, like you're on your own. You can't blame others because they told you to do it. You can't, lean on your community and say, well, they all think that way, so I think that way. You're on your own with your own reasons, and that's a scary position to be in too, but it's so much better. Like it's
Mhm.
infinitely better than the alternative.
Yeah. And like so like I feel like I mean, I'm sure I'm more caught by this trapping than others, but like just like the trapping of money and success. And I keep reminding myself because I remember I told you I was reading that book on Alaska and it was
Yeah.
cool. It had a whole section on like the gold rush because there was a gold rush in California, but then up in like the Yukon and Alaska, there was a big gold rush too. And like I'll be walking around and I'll be like, every single person who struck it rich in that gold rush is dead. Their life's over. They're done.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how
Yeah.
incredible that was for their life, whether for just a moment or for years, it's still over and done. And it's just like, so it clearly can't matter that much.
No. Well, that's the funny thing. You can't take gold with you after you die. You can't take stuff with you after you die. And it's like it's kind of funny because like I get, look, I get if if you have kids, I get wanting to leave. You know, that impulse to want to make enough so that you can leave stuff for them to make their life easier. That makes total sense. But like, if you're just earning money just for the sake of earning money to say you have more money, it's like, what is it doing for you? Like, do we ever stop and ask ourselves that? Like, well, what is this doing for me? Why is this valuable? Why is it meaningful? Is it just because I want more money? Or is it because I actually care about what I'm doing? It's important. I find meaning in it. I think that's a big question people don't ask ourselves because we're told a story about success equals wealth and nothing else. Rather than remembering that we're whole people, you know, we have friends, we have families, we have hobbies, we have joys, we have things we like, dislike, all this. And like, in order to have a good life, you have to kind of get the whole picture.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess when it comes down to it, existential crisis, if you don't have one, I would say you're probably pretty lucky.
Yeah. Or you should have one.
Yeah, or it's right around the
Force it.
corner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's right around the
Yeah.
corner. Yeah.
But I
But the
think if
cool
you
thing
do
is,
have,
yeah.
okay, go ahead. No, no, I was gonna say if you do have one,
Mhm.
lean into it and remind yourself that like this is an opportunity to not don't be afraid of like the change. Look at it as an opportunity to recreate yourself. I think that's a great way to look at it. Look at an opportunity to get things right and to justify the rest of your history because now you're living in the way that's right for you.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's one of these things that you just have to endure through. But I look at these like waves because like if you look back at your life, you've had high periods and low periods. And it's almost inevitably where it feels the absolute best or the absolute worst right before it changes. And I know that's
Yeah.
cliche that like it's darkest before dawn and blah blah blah. But like, from looking back at my life at least, I know the times when I thought I was not going to make it, period. I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to get through today. And then eventually I was through it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, a good thing about existential crisis I will say is like I noticed like especially like the last one that I went through, like I totally stopped caring about all these little things that I used to bother me or I used to care about. I just realized they don't matter at all to me. So who cares? And I think that's such a relieving thing to realize. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's a great way to get clear about what really matters to you. And when you do, life gets so much better. Not because it's
Mm-hmm.
easier, but just because it gets better because it's now your life. It's
Mm-hmm.
not somebody else's. You're not trying to live somebody else's model of what a person is, all of that. You're living your own thing. I think there's nothing better than that. And that gives life meaning in and of
Mm-hmm.
itself.
Bingo.
There you have it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, how to have an existential crisis and also why they're valuable and important. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Like, share, subscribe. Please leave a review. It helps us out a lot. We'll be back later this week with a quick fix. And until then, though, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.